PlayStation Studios have been gaining quite the reputation lately during the PS5 generation, and that is a reputation of silence. Despite owning 19 different studios, Sony has not revealed a whole lot about what many of them are working on. Instead, they seem to have shifted their marketing strategy and they only really want to talk about games when they are close to ready. But this move has been a bit frustrating to fans who not only love the pomp and circumstance surrounding big game announcements, but also just want to know what games they can actually expect this generation from these very talented studios. But despite all of this silence and lack of official game announcements, we actually know a lot about what is in store and what PlayStation Studios are going to be working on in 2024. Dr. Buplov here, and let's talk about it. So as I said, there are 19 studios under the PlayStation Studios umbrella, and I'm going to talk about what each one of them is doing. Some things we know about for sure, others we can kind of surmise from more credible leaks, and yet others can just be assumed with a large degree of certainty. We of course don't know everything, but we have a pretty decent picture. So let's start from the top, starting with Team Asobi, and this one is interesting. They came out with Astro's Playroom, which was a PS5 launch title, but that was essentially kind of a tech demo showing off the DualSense controller. But according to an interview with GameIndustry.biz, they've stated that they are working on something that is their biggest project yet, and many believe that this could be a fully blown Astrobot game. And this would be interesting as PlayStation, once known for platformers, doesn't really have that much of a presence these days. And so this could be something that can add some good variety. Of course, they could also be working on a PSVR 2 title and sequel to Astrobot Rescue Mission, which was pretty popular, although it doesn't seem like Sony is really paying too much attention to PlayStation VR 2 these days. Moving on to Sony Bend, it's been a few years since we have seen them with Days Gone, and you might actually expect them to go soon, but it's kind of hard to tell. Jason Schreier's prior reporting that was mostly about Naughty Dog indicated that Sony Bend was actually helping Naughty Dog at various points, providing some assistance on the Factions multiplayer project, which we'll talk about later, but they also apparently were working on an Uncharted game, which apparently got shelved because they weren't really that interested in doing it. But we've also received news that a Days Gone 2 was actually not greenlit, and so it's unclear what Sony Bend's next move would be. But in 2021, PlayStation blog released a QA with Herman Hulst and revealed that Bend would actually be working on a new IP with deep open world systems building off of what they developed for Days Gone. Bend themselves have also added after that their new game would also include a multiplayer. So while this is not a Days Gone sequel, I imagine it will probably play quite similarly. Moving on to Bluepoint, and this one is kind of funny because the studio is known for making remakes of old games. However, after being acquired and releasing Demon's Souls Remake, Bluepoint has spoken about their aspirations to make original work. It's unclear what this could be though, and whether they are not completely done with remakes, but I imagine they're not. Many believe that with their recent remake of an old FromSoft game, that perhaps they will continue that trend by making Bloodborne 2. This is definitely a highly desired PlayStation game, but fans also kind of want a remake or at least a remaster of the original Bloodborne, so that could be on the table as well. It's really hard to say at this point, but it's been a few years since we saw their last game, and so they may go soon. Firesprite. Now, Firesprite was acquired in 2020, and most recently they worked on Horizon Call of the Mountain for PSVR 2, but we also know what they may have in store. From a leaked document, it appears that the studio is working on a survival horror game codenamed Heartbreak, but in this very same leaked document, it says that another studio, Lucid Games, is working on a vehicular combat game, which is assumed to be a Twisted Metal reboot. But after recent talent left Lucid to join Firesprite, it's now being assumed that this Twisted Metal reboot is now being worked on by them. This actually makes sense as the Peacock Twisted Metal show would synergize well with a new game. However, the show has already come out and a new game hasn't been announced yet. It seems likely that it maybe just missed the window, especially with some of the development shakeups that seemingly occurred. Now moving on from Firesprite to Firewalk, this is another new PlayStation studio studio, but also one with a game that's officially announced by PlayStation at the 2023 Summer Showcase. Firewalk Studios is working on Concord, and while the trailer was CGI and didn't really give that much details, it's actually supposed to be a first-person shooter and is slated to come out in 2024. So presumably we should be getting some details relatively soon. Potentially this game is supposed to be an answer to Call of Duty, as Microsoft buying Activision forces Sony to have to now compete, but we will see how likely that is because it's going to be tough to take down that behemoth. Now Guerrilla Games. So we know a good deal about what Guerrilla is working on from that same leaked document that I talked about when talking about Firesprite. It's probably no surprise that Horizon 3 is in development, and it may be also not be such a surprise that a Horizon multiplayer is in development, as Sony themselves have listed them in their live service category in their 2023 financial call. But a Horizon remake or remaster seems to also be in development, and well, I hope this is a remaster if anything at all, because remaking a 2017 game is completely ridiculous. But it also seems that there's also another multiplayer MMO in the works as well from a different studio, but probably with some Guerrilla consultation. Sony has been really wanting this Horizon series to happen, and while I definitely like these games, this kind of feels a little bit like overkill. Moving on to Jade Raymond's Haven. This is also one of the few studios that we actually have a confirmed game from, and it's this live service Fair Games. This was shown at the Summer Showcase and seems to be sort of a PvP heist or payday style game. It's very Ubisoft, as this team is made up of former Ubisoft devs, but we haven't seen any gameplay from this yet, so it's yet to be seen exactly how this is all gonna work. Now on to Housemarque, where you might expect them to be working on a sequel to Returnal. However, they're actually working on a new IP, as they themselves confirmed. But we just don't know much at this point. But considering the games of their past, hopefully it will be a visual splendor. Insomniac. Now, this team has definitely been making moves on the PlayStation 5. Spider-Man Remastered, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and Spider-Man 2 have come out on the PS5 already, and they're not even done. Wolverine has been confirmed already through a teaser trailer at a former PlayStation showcase, and it seems like they're ramping up for that project already now that Spider-Man 2 is out. No doubt, however, Ratchet & Clank will get another entry eventually, although it may be a little while. And Insomniac Games is also working on a multiplayer of some sort. We don't know a lot of details on this, but my personal theory is this could be another Marvel game, maybe a Spider-Verse game with multiple Spider-Mans playing together. Now on to London Studios, and we know that they are working on a fantasy-based live service game that's set in London, and they have released a concept art for that project already. We don't know too much about this project just yet, but it seems like it's going to be some sort of cooperative multiplayer combat game. Hopefully we'll get some details soon. Now, Media Molecule has recently sunset support for the unfortunately not so successful Dreams, and it's kind of unclear what they will be working on next, but it has been confirmed that it's not a Dreams project. Personally, I hope it's maybe Little Big Planet 4, because I really like that game series, and that still allows for some of that cool user-generated creativity to flourish. Now on to Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog. So Naughty Dog's next game was supposed to be The Last of Us Factions 2, a live service game set in the world of The Last of Us, and they even released some concept art for it. But we found out through Jason Schreier's reporting that that's been delayed due to an internal Bungie review. And to top it all off, there's just been a lot of negative news piling up surrounding this game, and it's possible that this is in some sort of development hell, but I still think we're ultimately going to get it, because I do think this is the live service game in PlayStation's lineup that probably has the most shot of actually making it. But this game might not be next. What does seem to be next is The Last of Us Remastered, which would likely come out alongside season 2 of The Last of Us TV show. It's possible that this actually does come out in 2024, considering the TV show probably won't be out till 2025. But Naughty Dog isn't only working on that. They also are working on their bread and butter, a brand new single player experience, of which I actually think there are 2 single player experiences in some form of development. Naughty Dog recently had a job posting suggesting that they are looking to expand their current bench of IPs, and thusly it looks like they are looking to have a new IP come into the fray. In addition to that, though, is The Last of Us Part 3, which is also highly likely given the success and plans to continue the HBO show. Plus, Neil stating that he had a draft of a story ready, and I mean, come on, it's not rocket science, this game is happening. And then for good measure, and although this isn't technically Naughty Dog or really a PlayStation studio, the Visual Arts Service Group, basically the team that was started up to make The Last of Us Part 1 remake, that team seems to be reforming to work on another one of Naughty Dog's IPs, and that is likely the next Uncharted game of some sort. There have been hints of this even in Sony's own marketing. Their Live from PS5 seemed to show off Uncharted, but not starring Nathan Drake. And we also know from Jason Schreier's reporting that there were other failed attempts to bring a new Uncharted game from Sony Bend, and even the Visual Arts Service Group themselves had considered remaking Uncharted 1 before deciding to remake The Last of Us. So I think it's pretty clear that Sony isn't done with this franchise, but it also seems like Naughty Dog themselves are helping out, but in a smaller capacity with this game. And actually, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they ultimately market this game as a Naughty Dog game for the brand. Personally, I love Uncharted and would be happy for another adventure. Okay, so moving on to Nixxes. This is a PC port studio, so while they won't be really giving us any new games, they should be working on some ports. Now, Horizon Forbidden West makes sense to be ported soon, and because of that, they probably will port God of War Ragnarok to PC, as that game came out the same year in 2022. Also, The Last of Us Part 2 is going to be remastered, and I'm pretty sure coming out on PC around the same time. And hopefully Nixxes can do that port, because Iron Galaxy brought us this gem when they ported The Last of Us Part 1. It's not clear, but Nixxes may also be able to help some of the live service teams, as those games are more likely to come day and date to PC in addition to the PS5. Moving on quickly to Polyphony. Most likely, Gran Turismo 8 is likely the next one. San Diego Studio is another boring one about a boring game. MLB The Show every year, not my thing. Okay, Santa Monica Studio, and now back to something juicy. So it appears from job postings that this studio is still planning to bring new God of War games. And based on God of War Ragnarok, I guess this is light spoilers, so click away if you don't want any, but I do think we may get a standalone Atreus game with a bit of a smaller campaign similar to Spider-Man Miles Morales or Uncharted Lost Legacy. Of course, we also know that God of War Ragnarok's director, Eric Williams, also expressed that he is cool with Santa Monica Studio being known as the God of War studio, and thus I anticipate we will probably get new fully blown God of War games, hopefully with Kratos and exploring some other mythologies. Santa Monica Studio is also supposedly working on a new IP that's being developed by Cory Barlog, director of God of War 2018, and this is something I am very excited to see. Many have speculated that this is a sci-fi game, and Cory Barlog himself likes to drop these cryptic hints, but at this point we really don't know enough. Sucker Punch is another interesting one because while they haven't confirmed what they are working on, they have gone out of their way to specifically say what they are not working on, and that is a Sly Cooper game or an Infamous series game. And that basically just leaves a new Ghost of Tsushima game on the plate because it was a new IP, and I don't really see them doing two new IPs in a row, especially since Ghost of Tsushima was very successful. So I think there's no doubt that Ghost of Tsushima 2 is on the way, and it might be relatively soon considering the first game came out in 2020 and it's been quite a while. Next, we move on to Valkyrie Entertainment, which is basically a support studio, and so they could be helping out with one of the games I mentioned prior, like they did help out with God of War Ragnarok most recently, but rumors seem to suggest maybe they're working on a strategy game of some sort, and given their prior history, it could be part of Sony's mobile games play. Not something I personally care about, but we know they're trying to make moves there, so maybe they're trying to do it with Valkyrie. And then XDev, which is another support studio and not likely to be making their own game. Instead, we know they're helping out with Rise of the Ronin, Stellar Blade, and Concord from Firewalk Studios. And so, yeah, we might not have a ton of official announcements from PlayStation themselves, but one thing is clear, the games are coming and these studios are working on them. And it seems that while PlayStation is definitely trying to add some variety to their portfolio, we can still expect a lot of these narrative-based single-player games, and even some new IP that seem exciting can be expected. But did I miss anything? And what are you personally most excited for? Let me know in the comments. And it just so happens that this actually isn't the only game coming from PlayStation Studios. In fact, Helldivers 2 is being published by PlayStation. And so while Arrowhead is not technically a PlayStation Studios, it still gets that branding. And Helldivers 2 is coming really soon. So if you want to know everything there is to know about that game, you should check this video out. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.